Wait for it. Wait for it, and we're live. Hey, all you crazy sci-fi and fantasy fans. It's time for your daily dose of shenanigans over here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. Just a couple of nerdy veterans, a stabby chaos coordinator, and one chief shenanigator geeking out over our science fiction passions and fantastical fantasies. A place where magic is king, the sky is the limit, and space is the place. We are the podcast that puts the fun in dysfunction. So without further ado, we're going to let our guest, Mr. Joe Vasicek, introduce himself to our listeners and viewers at home.
Hi, my name is Joe Vasicek. I write books. I write mostly science fiction fantasy. I've been writing for, for a while now, since about the 20-aughts, and publishing since about 2011, mostly independently published. Sell everything on Amazon and also my own website, and basically wherever you can get ebooks.
Okay. Are you starting to put your all of the short stories that you had back up for sale?
Yeah, they're all for sale in the collections.
Okay.
What I'm doing is I'm kind of slowly rotating them through them on my newsletter. So I send out a newsletter once a month, and every newsletter's got a free, a link to just kind of read it online. Got a free short story. So I'm just kind of slowly going through all those, and I'm also I've got kind of a collection, a series that I do. I call it the Vasicek Free Library. Kind of a hat tip to the Bain Free Library. And what I do is I try to rotate in a couple new titles. It's about 7 books or 7 stories, and I'll rotate usually a novel and then short story into there, and just kind of keep that going every month.
Okay. All right. So before we get too deep into this interview, we do have to do the religion question. Are you ready for this?
I believe I am.
All right. Stargate, Battlestar Galactica, or Babylon 5?
I'm probably more fan. Well, I haven't watched all of Babylon 5, but what I had seen, I was really impressed by. I really did. I think the writing's really good, and the story's really interesting, and the different interactions with the alien races is really good. I got through about season 3, and then the semester ended, and I ended up not watching the rest of it on my computers. But but I need to finish that. It's really good.
And I've watched it somewhat recently because we did an episode on it because we do our panel episodes. It surprisingly holds up. I mean, yes, by modern standards, some of the graphics are cheesy, but as far as like the plot and the acting, like I'll take that compared favorably against anything that's out there right now.
I randomly remember one scene where you've got the guy and his security officer, and they're flying the fighters, and they're like, waiting to go into combat, and the guy asks him, "So, do you zip up and button, or do you button and zip?" And so he's like, "What the heck are you asking me for?" And I don't know. I just random interaction on the show.
I haven't seen that one, but if I had, I don't know that it would have necessarily stuck in my head that way. But yeah, the little details are where Babylon 5 shines. It makes the universe feel a lot more lived in, I think.
Yeah.
So, all right. So because we are polytheistic here at the Blasters and Blades podcast, The Witcher, Castlevania, or Carnival Row.
So I'm going to have to go with a different one for those, but it is connected because The Witcher, there was an award that ran for about 10 years called the Gemmell Awards, and they're named after David Gemmell. And I think The Witcher won the first one, either won it or was nominated for the first year in that award. But the awards are named after my favorite fantasy author of all time, who is my favorite fantasy author who's not Tolkien, and that's David Gemmell. And so I'm going to have to go with David Gemmell. His book Legend is really quite excellent. So,
is that the basis of the movie Legend?
I have never seen the movie, so I can't say. If it's about a guy with an axe fighting an unwinnable war, fighting an unwinnable battle, with a horde of barbarians trying to overwhelm a fortress, then that sounds pretty close.
No, Legend is about a unicorn.
Okay, yeah, no, totally different thing.
I mean, a unicorn wielding an axe would be cool too, though.
Yeah. No, Legend is a book about there's a battle that everyone knows they're going to lose, and it's about the people who go and fight it anyways and why they go fight it, even though they know they're going to die. And it's really interesting because David Gemmell, what happened was he kind of had a rough life. He grew up without a father. He was kind of worked as a bouncer for a while. He was kicked out of high school, apparently for setting a gambling syndicate in his high school or something. And he was kind of bouncing around. He was working as like a local reporter for a while until they fired him. And then what happened was he got a diagnosis for cancer, and the doctor said, "You have cancer. It's terminal. We're going to do another series of tests to find out how much longer you have left." And he kind of was totally shocked by that and went home and was like, "What do I want to do that I might not have any time left to do?" And said, "I always wanted to write a fantasy novel." So he sat down and he wrote Legend in about 2 weeks. And the whole thing is basically all about kind of musings on. It's got all the swords and adventure and the fighting and everything else. It's really action packed, but deep down in its heart, it's really about why do you keep fighting even though you know you're going to lose? Like why do we all know we're going to die? So what's the point of what are you fighting for? And that's kind of what it's about. And then he finished the book in 2 weeks. He goes back to his doctor, and the doctor says, "Oh, the results came back, and it turns out that it's actually a false positive. You don't have cancer. So have a nice life," basically. And so he trunked the novel. He wasn't going to publish it or do anything with it. And then his friend read it and was like, "You got to publish this." And so he published it. And he's in the UK, and he published it, and it was a huge bestseller. And then he wrote like 30 other books just like it. They were all real big bestsellers. And I love them all. I think he's a really great author.
That is one heck of a how I got started writing story for him.
Oh yeah, no, it's fascinating.
It's the best medical mistake anyone can ever get.
I guess. I mean, yeah.
Unless you do that, you get that news, and you go blow all of your money, and then you find out no, you get the rest of your life, and you just blew like your entire $1 million inheritance in one day.
Yeah, some of us are going to be a little more like, "Oh, dang it! I wish you hadn't." Yeah. Some of us are going to have different reactions, I guess.
Yeah, but I'll have to check that book out. Is it out in audiobook? Do you know?
Oh yeah, no, I'm sure it's an audio. I think it's probably up in Audible. It's been a long time.
I'll have to go check it out. In fact, I will make a point of linking to that in the show notes, dear listener. So if you want to check it out yourself, because I'm curious. That sounds like right up my alley. In fact, they used to do those missions. They called them like Forlorn Hopes. When they were heroic, not kind of I don't know if it was the last stand, but it was more because it was a breaching action, generally speaking. But where everyone's expected to die kind of mission.
Yeah.
And if you survived, generally there was a lot of reward on the other end for you if you just didn't die. Yeah.
Kind of like you're talking kind of like in Dunkirk, where the British were kind of like, you're gonna die, you're gonna lose, but you're gonna buy time for us to get all the troops out.
Yeah. Yeah, that I know people that have been stationed in South Korea on the DMZ and that were told that was their job, is like, yeah, you're going to die, but you just need to hold for 2 hours.
Dang. Yeah. No,
I don't know how true that is because I have never been stationed there, but I imagine being told that as your marching orders pre-combat has a way of messing with your mind.
I'll bet it is. I don't have any combat or veteran experience myself, but no, yeah, that's got to be crazy. But when you sign up, you kind of, you're willing to do the sacrifice, to the ultimate sacrifice for your country and everything. So hopefully you're ready to do that. Yeah.
Have you written anything like what David wrote? Has any of your writing been inspired by some of his stories?
I've written a little bit of sword and sorcery. I wouldn't say anything is quite as gritty or quite as dark. He's kind of, I like to think of David Gemmell as kind of the anti-George R. R. Martin. Okay. Because George R. R. Martin is very nihilistic, right? And so you get a lot of characters, a lot of them are going to die, a lot of them are going to, but George R. R. Martin is really focused on the whole idea of victimhood. Like, is this character a victim or the victimizer? And what's the difference? Some people are both victims in one way and victimizers in others, but that's the thing that he obsesses the most about. There's a lot of undercurrent of nihilism in his stuff, which is why I never read past the first book. I did finish the first book in the Song of Ice and Fire, the Game of Thrones book, but after that I was kind of like, this isn't really for me. David Gemmell, he's like, on the surface it looks like it's a lot of the same stuff. He's very usually half the characters are going to die. Usually it's going to be really violent. There's going to be a lot of other stuff, but his focus is on what is a hero and what does it take to be a hero. And he has a very simple formula, which is basically a hero is someone who does something heroic. So he'll have characters who have been really horrible people. Maybe they've done horrible things in their lives, but when the chips are down and a hero is acquired, they'll step up and do it. And he likes to redeem a lot of his characters and a lot of his side characters. but yeah, it gets really but yeah, you can expect a lot of violence. A lot of characters are going to die, but it's going to be you're going to see some real heroism in action in this book.
Now, what you described, though, I just sounded similar to the Hill Upon Which You Will Die short story.
Yeah.
You wrote.
Yeah.
So I was wondering if that was inspired.
A little bit, yeah. No, the that work story that I wrote. That's probably one of the closer ones. I've written some books later. I've been writing some fantasy books, kind of as practice, in this series called the Sea Mage Cycle, and those are more. They've got more of a nautical flavor to them, but they've got a lot of magic, and they're more. They've got a little bit more of kind of like a romance adventure flair to them. But the first book in that series, actually, the setup. Okay, so the first book, The Widow's Child. That's the first book chronologically in the series right now, and that one, the setup is actually kind of inspired by I believe it's called Wolf in Shadow. It used to be called The Jerusalem Man, but that was a David Gemmell book. There's this woman who is kind of a widow, and there's a passing kind of man, kind of a drifting kind of sellsword type guy who's got he's got some trauma he's working through and everything, and they basically get together because like she needs protections and he needs some healing and stuff, and they get together and it actually starts kind of a sweet romance, and then it goes crazy from there. But because I mean it's no spoilers, but it's not a happy ever after book. But that kind of like I was explicitly thinking about that when I was writing The Widow's Child, so it's got kind of a similar setup.
Okay. So one of the crying shames of adulthood is we do stop asking ourselves the important questions. On one of your previous podcasts, you've answered what your favorite dinosaur is. So today I'm going to ask you, what is your favorite zoo animal?
My favorite zoo animal? Oh my gosh. If you ask favorite dinosaur, I could actually give you my kid's favorite dinosaur.
Yeah, they're old enough now. It's crazy. Time flies.
Yeah, I know my kids. They're right now they're just crazy into dinosaurs. We took them to the dinosaur exhibit. There's a really awesome dinosaur museum at Thanksgiving Point here in Utah. And so we took them to that, and they've just been going crazy. My 3-year-old son, he calls himself, we were having waffles in the morning, and he says, I'm a baryonyx because I eat berries. And so that was kind of funny. Let's see.
Solid logic.
What's that?
Solid logic.
Yeah. Oh, favorite zoo animal? I don't know. Let's see. There were some gorillas last time when we went to the zoo over in Omaha. There were some gorillas. They were pretty fun to watch, and they'd come right up to the glass and just kind of put their hand up there, and you'd kind of put your hand up, and the kids really loved that.
Cool. That would be. I was always more into the wolves and the cats than the gorillas, but I mean they definitely are impressive.
Yeah.
I get it. All right, and we are civilized human beings here at the Blasters and Blades podcast. We are no longer knuckle dragging troglodytes. So, coffee or tea, and how do you take it?
I'm a member of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, so I don't drink either one of those. But when I do need caffeine, I'll take a cola. But I generally try to keep the caffeine kind of low.
Now, when you say cola, do you mean like is that an actual local brand, or is there just you don't have a preference?
I like Pepsi over Coke, but I'll generally take the Shasta. So.
Oh, that is okay.
But Shasta not that great.
No, it's not one you hear all the time.
Yeah, no, we've got them. They're a real cheap alternative out here, so I go for the cheap, I guess.
I thought, being from Utah, you were like contractually obligated to say Dr. Pepper because it seems everyone from Utah likes Dr. Pepper.
I guess so. I don't know.
It might even be the official state bird at some point.
Oh God. Yeah, no. Funny enough, the state bird is actually a seagull, even though we have no borders in the ocean. I guess we have an inland sea, so that's kind of like the Salt Lake City.
You have a Navy base in Utah.
Oh, we do? That's kind of
cool. It's one of the crypto bases for I guess because you can get a lot of because you can get the space to set up like a server farm type deal. They set a crypto base there. One of the people, because I live in Hampton Roads, one of the people I know that was going to the school there, it's like, oh yeah, I'm going to Utah to get stationed in the Navy Reserve. I'm like, wait, Utah? There's no water.
I know the Great Salt Lake's apparently drying up too, so that's kind of that'll be terrible if that ever happens. But
yeah, but you can have a Navy that floats on sand, so you'll be good.
I guess will be like I don't know what'll happen with that. But I know there's some NSA stuff. I forget if it's NSA or if it's a different, but there's definitely a big server farm that's up near Thanksgiving Point where they do a lot of the like most of the internet traffic flows through there, and so they do all kinds of stuff there. But we got a lot of tech companies up here too, so they call it the Silicon Slopes.
Oh, nice. It's catchy. I'll take it. So how did you get started in, your love of speculative fiction? Because obviously nobody just wakes up and says, you know what, I want to write a book today, having never read one. So what was your journey like from, Joe the kid to suddenly you're a published author?
Okay, so journey to being published, because I've always read science fiction and fantasy. I think it was really Star Wars that got me into science fiction. And then for fantasy, it was probably I read a lot of Tracy Hickman when I was a lot younger, but I think it was really reading Lord of the Rings the first time that got me more into fantasy, and then kind of expanded there and everything. But journey to getting published, it's kind of interesting actually. I was let's see, I always knew I was going to be a writer, but I didn't think I was ever going to do it as a career until I took Brandon Sanderson's class. And then I graduated from college, and I kind of was like, well, it was the middle of the recession, and it was impossible to find a job. But I was fortunate enough that I didn't have any kind of debt. I'd actually gotten a good enough scholarship, and BYU is a really cheap school anyway, like a really inexpensive school anyways. So I was like, you know what, I might as well pursue this writing thing. And it was right around 2010 and 2011 when this happened. And that was right around the time when self-publishing was starting to become a thing. And so it was... If it had been any other time, I doubt. If it had been like a couple of years early, I probably wouldn't have pursued it. But I decided, you know what? I have nothing to lose. Why don't I just try throwing up a couple stories and learning how this process works? And I've really enjoyed. I put in a couple short stories. I put in a couple novels. Those started selling a little bit. I've never had a huge breakout. I did early on before Kindle Unlimited happened. I did have a few stories that were starting to get some traction. Kindle Unlimited happened. I feel sometimes like I've made every mistake it's possible to make in self-publishing, except for writing smut. I've never written smut, but some people would say that is a mistake in itself. So I don't know, but so I didn't get in. If I'd gotten into Kindle Unlimited on the ground floor, that might have taken my career a very different direction. But I've basically whenever I evaluate, it's like, okay, should I keep doing this or should I try to get a real job? It's always been like, no, you should. It's going just enough that you can keep on doing it. And so I've gotten married now. I've got some kids. My wife works she's a professor at BYU right now, and so that's kind of what we're doing, just kind of living the dream and trying to put a book out as frequently as I can, and trying to keep my sanity while all this other crazy stuff is happening. But I don't know if you can hear them. She's putting them to bed right now.
So no, luckily you're soundproofed well enough. So when you were like, did you grow up in a family that was encouraging the reading and the love of speculative fiction, or is that something you found on your own?
Not so much the love of speculative fiction as much as just reading. And my parents, like they encouraged me to read whatever I was interested in. And I was I got into science fiction specifically with the Star Wars books, mostly with Kevin G. Anderson.
Okay.
Because I saw Star Wars when I was 7 years old, and I was just bouncing off the walls, over the moon, in love with Star Wars, everything Star Wars for the next 10 years of my life. And so I wanted to get all that I could. And I saw all the movies over and over again, but there were only 3 at the time, so there's only so much you can. Well, I guess there was also the Ewok special, which I saw once. But then there was, of course, the Christmas special, which I don't think I've ever actually seen it all the way through. But to be fair, you had to have the internet to be able to see that. So I went to my local library and I was like, let's get all the Star Wars books I could find. And it was mostly Kevin J. Anderson, Timothy Zahn, Dave Wolverton, and just really, and then it was when I got into Roger Allen McBride and his Corellia series, where I was like, he had a totally different flavor to his sci-fi. He was much more into it's a little more hard sci-fi, and how, and talk about kind of the vastness of space and about what it means and all this stuff. And I was really that was when I was like, oh, there's science fiction can be a little bit different than this shoot 'em up with lasers and stuff. And so that's when I started expanding a little bit more into other kinds of sci-fi. And yeah, and then most of my sci-fi reading was in college. A lot of like the Asimovs. I read the 1001, Clark, Asimov, Heinlein, and stuff. Did a lot of that in college.
Okay. Is that something that like you stand out then among your family as the one who likes that kind of stuff, or did your siblings develop an interest as well?
I think I'm kind of unique in the family. I wouldn't say I'm one of the black sheep, but I'm kind of. I think they like it. I mean, they like the Lord of the Rings movies, and they kind of think Star Wars is fun, but they're not like as much into it as I was. So.
Okay. Now, when you were watching the Star Wars, were you going? Was it playing in the theater for you? Because you're not old enough to have been there for the original launch, but some places played it in the repeat theaters if you were lucky, or were you watching it on VCR?
I do think it was mostly VCR. Yeah, especially because our copy of The Empire Strikes Back, there was it was on TV for a while, and that's where my parents recorded it, and so it was kind of like it had like the wavy lines and everything. Which kind of added a flavor to the Hoth battle and everything, the parts with the snow and everything. But I think the special editions, like where they did kind of a revamp back in the 90s, I think those came out in the theaters, but I never saw them in the theaters. My parents did take me to see Jurassic Park, and that was a lot of fun to watch in the theater. I was scared out of my wits, especially the Velociraptors. But no, yeah.
Yeah, Jurassic Park in the theaters is. I only wish I had caught that in the theaters. When I watched that, it was already out. I discover most things, it seems, late because I always tended to keep my head down doing whatever I was focused on. And by the time I noticed something, the momentum had passed. And I'm like, oh, wait, what? And so I watched it when it was on HBO when they'd play the same 3 movies or whatever, like over and over again.
Yeah. No, I've got to confess. Yeah, I'm the same way, especially now. I've got to confess, I didn't see Dune 2 in the theaters, and I kind of regret that. Because I saw the first one, but and the second one is like, looked really fantastic, but I just never got around to seeing it. I've just been so crazy busy with the kids and everything.
Yeah, that's life gets in the way sometimes.
Yeah, they're not old enough yet that they would really appreciate, they're not old enough yet for it either. So otherwise I would have taken them with them. But yeah.
And then, of course, when they get old enough, you'll regret the time flies.
Yeah. I am looking forward to watching Star Wars with them. One of these, maybe in a year or two. I don't know. We'll see.
What is the proper order to watch them with them?
Oh, well, I'm kind of a purist. I mean, for me, it's really just the original trilogy. And then maybe if you want, you can watch the sequel, like the prequel trilogy, maybe. But that's more of I don't know. But I think just the original episode 4, 5, and 6, and then I just kind of stopped there. Maybe Rogue One. Rogue One is a really good kind of nostalgia to the original trilogy, and it was also just a good movie in itself. But no, I'd probably just do episode 4, 5, and 6, 4, 5, and 6.
Yeah. The Rogue One had a funny breakdown of the whole operation that the Angry Staff Officer podcast did. That was hilarious. About all the military logistics and what went right and what went wrong. And it wasn't like their overall take was it was a good movie, it was good representation. And then they were just critiquing the officers themselves who planned it more than the movie. Because, you can't have everything go perfect because that's just not real either. Right. Yeah. And so they were just more talking about the logistics behind, combat, but they've also broke down some of the issues with the fights in like the Game of Thrones series.
Oh yeah.
The TV version of it, they didn't break down the books. They were, looking at like the logistics and the combined arms that were not used properly in the Game of Thrones series in those battles. They just make no sense. Just looking at them, like anybody who's even played chess can look like none of that quite makes sense. Why would you use your forces that way? You're not taking advantage of any of it, right?
Why would you send your cavalry into a charge in the middle of the night against zombies and they all die?
Exactly. Cavalry flanks, cavalry scouts. You do have heavy cavalry, but that's not how they were used. And you've got dragons, for crying out loud. Why aren't you roasting everything from the sky?
Yeah, no, no.
But yeah, it was just the podcast that used to be. I don't know if it's even still on anymore. It's been years since I listened, but the breakdowns from the mill. And now they have some that'll like break down some of like the battle at Helm's Deep.
Oh, yeah.
A bunch of veterans will have podcasts now where they like analyze the tactics of various battles in books and movies. They're hilarious to watch. Or if I had 100 Rangers here, what would I do differently? Of course, most of the time when you're throwing modern weapons against people with swords, it's not really fair. It's fun, but not really fair.
Oh, I gotta say, I was studying Arabic back in 2000, back in like 2009, and I was studying at the University of Amman, and I was over at Karak at the castle over there, kind of exploring the ruins and everything. And I thought to myself, what would it be like, when Saladin had a siege of this place? What would it have been like if you had like, maybe a few dozen special forces guys, or like 100 Marines, holding this place down? How would it have been? How would it have gone differently? That was kind of interesting to think about.
Yeah, I do that with a lot. That's why I loved the Guns of the South that Harry Turtledove did.
Yeah, yes, that's an excellent book.
I've thought about doing my own version of it and, going to the Revolution instead, like one, Browning, and none of the landings ever happen.
This is my boomstick. I don't know, just thinking, going into fantasy.
Yeah, that might be interesting to watch. Of course, that's not even as clear cut though, because, the Brits weren't the only enemy at that one. Obviously you have the natives and the locals that sided with the Brits. So, but that's a whole nother podcast. So, all right, we're going to pause for a moment while we shamelessly shill for the man. And then when we come back, we're going to dive into the Falconstar Trilogy.
They're specialists, corporals, and petty officers. They're the military personnel who have learned some leadership and gained experience in their specialty. Work smarter, not harder is their watch phrase, followed by, if you ain't cheatin', you ain't trying. The masters of avoiding work, getting up to shenanigans, and when a mission needs to be completed or a job done, it's an E4 that others turn to. They are the near-mythical E4 Mafia, and their ability to avoid work, solve problems, and create trouble is the stuff of legend. Henchman Press presents 11 stories of the E4 Mafia in a variety of settings and situations sure to thrill and entertain anyone with an interest in military fiction, science fiction, a sense of humor, and the curiosity to peek under the rug to see what got swept there. Get Tales of the E4 Mafia from Amazon.com today.
All right, thank you for sticking with us through that commercial interlude. And if you're listening to this and that sounds interesting, Tales from the E4 Mafia Volume 2 will be coming out soon. They are preparing it as we speak. The stories are done. They're turned in. They're formatting them now. The cover is done. So you should be seeing those coming up soon. And I have a story in those based on something that really happened when I was in Iraq. So, which obviously we turned it around and we put it in space, but I mean, it's there. So, all right, with that out of the way, we came here to talk about your Falconstar Trilogy, which starts with the Queen, Captive of the second one. There you go. Queen of the Falconstar is the first book in the trilogy. And before we get started too deeply, we like to ask, Jana likes to call the parent question. So what would you say the rating of this book is for people that are listening?
Oh, the rating. I would say it's actually kind of this one's going to be, well, for this particular book or for the whole trilogy?
For the trilogy writ large, if it's different book by book, that would be interesting to know too.
It's probably going to be on the PG-13, possibly. No, it's probably going to be pretty hard PG-13 at this point. Yeah.
Now, when you say hard PG-13, what makes it a hard PG-13 for you?
Well, I know. Remind me what the difference is between PG-13 and R. I don't think it crosses the line over on R necessarily. I think with R you've got to have the language is there's not a whole lot of profanity in it. There is quite a bit of violence. There's quite a bit of sex actually, and so there's not really any sexual violence, but there is some sex in it actually.
Does that happen off screen?
Well, some of it does and some of it doesn't. Most of it happens off screen, some of it doesn't. It's
might actually are.
Yeah, it's not gratuitous. It's not like, for it to be titillating or anything, but it does, because what the series is about, really, it's about a couple of girls who they get captured by these space nomads or these space barbarians, basically. And it's about how they kind of work their way up to they work their way from being slaves to actually being pretty high up in the hierarchy. I don't think it quite crosses the line to R, but it's been a while since I've really reviewed what the difference is between the two. It's definitely not one of I wouldn't necessarily say it's for mature audiences only, but it's not something I'd want to, share with my kids until they're a little bit older.
That's fair. So, teenagers.
Yeah, teenagers would probably be okay. It's not like glorifying a lot of the crazy stuff, and there's not really any sexual. Well, there's a threat of sexual violence that's pretty constant, but there's not any actual sexual violence that happens in the books. And I don't think it crosses. It's not really pornographic either, but there is some harem intrigue, basically.
Okay, and so with that out of the way, where did you get the idea for the series, and does this series fit in any of your other universes?
Yes, it actually does. So we've talked in previous episodes about Outworlder and the Star Wanderers series, the Outworld Trilogy. This takes place in the same universe. It takes place a few hundred years after. I think, remind me, have we talked about the Sons of the Starfarers, kind of the follow-up series?
I don't think so. We've talked about the first one, but not the Sons of.
Yeah. So in the same universe as the Star Wanderer, because those are both set in the same. Those are kind of both set pretty close together, and actually have some characters who are kind of interchangeable between the two. And in Sons of the Starfarers, just to kind of, there was a band of space pirates who basically decided to, well, with the new technology that they had that allowed better FTL, they decided to basically go out in the very deep beyond and just kind of form their own society, their own group. That kind of happened over the course of the books there. And this is a few hundred years later, and they're actually kind of a force on the frontier that is they will regularly raid a lot of the outposts. They'll kind of get their ships together. They're still mostly kind of out in the outer reaches of space, so they don't interact a whole lot with the rest, or they don't generally threaten very much the people in those places yet. It's not for another several hundred years after that in the other books, the Hammergy cycle, which I wrote, where they actually get their stuff together and they actually unite the tribe and then come down and actually invade settled space and start wreaking real havoc. And that happens in the Hammergy cycle. But this is a few hundred years before that. While they're still very disunited, they're basically just a bunch of nomadic, starfaring tribes fighting each other all the time, and trying to, basically, they've got all these blood feuds going on and all this other stuff going on. And they will occasionally raid what they call the planet-born, which is the people who are actually attached to planets as opposed to living in spaceships. And they will occasionally take captives and things. They're mostly looking for spaceships to replace the ones that they've got, so they can upgrade them and build them and turn those into warships. And the main character is this girl. Her name is Zlata. She's kind of this engineer. She's got kind of an engineering mindset. She's more about solving problems and trying to work things through. She's very analytical. She's very kind of almost ruthless in the way she analyzes things. She can tell she's in this tiny kind of frontier, podunk, middle of nowhere outpost, kind of in the outworld frontier. She doesn't really have much of a future going for her in this kind of like small town, kind of small colony that she's living at. And basically everyone there's a whole lot of nepotism and things are kind of barely holding together, and she doesn't like any of that. So when they get raided by these space nomads, and they say, okay, we're going to take a captive, they choose this one girl, and she's like, that girl's never going to live 2 minutes. I'll volunteer in her place instead. And then the captain's like, I'll take both of you. So they both get taken as captives together, and they both have to kind of figure out how the society works, how they're going to work their way through it, what leverage they have, and how they're going to leverage their position to kind of rise up. She's kind of helping the other girl who's kind of, not used to any of this kind of thing. She's not really, she barely holds it together in the first book. Her name is Sonia. But Zlata basically is able to see opportunities and take advantage of those, and eventually she rises to become the queen of the starship.
Okay.
And that's the first book.
And then and that's already out. And then you said that was written a couple years ago. And then you're writing, or Captive of the Falconstar is the second book in this trilogy that is out for pre-order as we record this. And it'll be, about within a month of this episode airing, it'll be coming out.
Yep.
So what, obviously no spoilers, but what is the second one about? Is it following the same characters?
It follows the same characters. This one is where, so the other girl who got chosen, and she's kind of rescued, she's kind of under the wing of this girl, but she just wants to go home, right? And this Zlata, she's gone totally native, and she's not going to let her escape. She's like, no, I'm not going to, I'll protect you, but we're not going to go back home. And this is the book where she gets her revenge.
Oh.
And so it's basically her learning how to rise over this, out of this situation. And then she basically makes some secret deals with she makes some contacts and some secret deals with these sworn blood enemies of this clan that they're with. And she goes from wanting to escape to wanting to get revenge to just things going horribly wrong.
So in the end, she goes native too.
Sort of. Not exactly, but it's really more the third book where things kind of level out and there actually has more resolution. Yeah.
You call this a trilogy. Does that mean that the story will be done after the third book?
Yes, the story will be done after the third book. I might do like one of those prequel novellas or a reader magnet or something, but this is going to be a complete trilogy in itself.
And then are you going to be doing anything else in the universe with these characters that's kind of contemporary timeline, or is the next one going to be later on in the universe?
Probably not. I think I've got three other series that are complete that are in this. The Hemiji cycle, I could add a couple more because the Hemiji cycle is all standalones. I could add a couple more standalones to that one. But I think this one is the one that really connects those early books like Star Wanderers and Sons of the Starfarers, that connects those ones to the Hemiji cycle. And I think after that, I think I'm going to be done with this universe for a while, unless there is a real clamoring for, unless they start to go big and there's real clamoring for readers to do it, then I can pick them up again. But I think this is going to be the last in this kind of universe for a while, I think.
Is it you burned out with the universe, or do you have other plans you're writing?
No, I'm not burned out with the universe. I love the universe. I think it's more, I'm trying to pivot more towards fantasy. Although, to be honest, even though these books are science fiction, they've got more of a fantasy flavor. The society is very feudal in a lot of ways. You have lords and you have lords and ladies. You have kind of like space knights and stuff, and you have feudal vassal arrangements and blood feuds, and it's more tribal than I would say kind of like high medieval feudal. But you have a lot of tribes fighting each other, making marriage alliances, doing things like this. The marriage alliance has actually become really key in the second book, and that happens a lot. But it's really and then also producing an heir. Who's going to have the heir to the and making sure you have a succession plan. So in some ways, these books are kind of fantasy. They're more science fantasy, but they're set in a science fictional universe, far future, out in space, very much space opera. Almost, I don't know if I'd exactly call them Mill SF, but they're kind of Mill SF adjacent, and they're a little more hard SF. They're a little harder. They're more hard SF than Star Wars for sure. But yeah, so they're sci-fi. I guess you'd say they're kind of sci-fi in the world, but they've got kind of an undertone of more fantasy.
So for this world, do you have a name for the overall universe that the Falconstar Trilogy falls under?
The universe, I don't actually. For a while, I was calling it the Gaia Nova universe, but I decided to rename the books from the Gaia Nova books to the Hemiji cycle. So I don't have a name for the universe itself.
Why the Hemiji cycle? That's an interesting.
So Hemiji is the Hemiji is kind of this Arabic word for barbarian, and that's kind of who the the key to those books, and really the key to the rest of the books too, is this group of people that they decide we're going to leave the settled space and the empire that exists there and all of their civilization, the civilized worlds. We're going to break out and go into the outer reaches of space and just as far as we can go, and we're going to create our own kind of warfaring civilization out there. And they struggle for a long time, but then eventually they get together, and when they come back with a vengeance, and that happens in the Handley cycle.
Now, so they go out there to go basically be space Vikings.
Pretty much.
Okay.
I would say more like space Mongols. I guess in these books they're more like space Vikings. But in the Handley cycle book, they're more like space Mongols.
Now, in the other books in the series, there was definitely a religious component, not necessarily like modern religion, but they had almost like an earth worship religion going on. Does that play a factor now that the time has progressed from the first series?
A little bit. It's been changed. It's with the Handley are a little bit different. So in the earlier books, you've got the people. What's happened is millions of years ago, or thousands of years ago, they don't really know how long. What happened was that we created a spaceship here on Earth. We created several spaceships to go out and see the distant galaxy. And the spaceship was run by an AI that basically took us out, for thousands and thousands of years. And by the time it arrived at the planet, we'd forgotten where Earth was. Things had changed. The AI basically self-destructed as soon as the people went down, so it wouldn't be a threat for the people. And they settled this planet, which is kind of the second Earth, but they always held Earth in kind of reverence. And so those are the kind of the people in the Corward stars and where their orientation is. But in the outer reaches, their orientation is very different. They're not really looking for a second Earth. They're really looking more they have kind of a pagan religion. They believe that the gods and the goddesses actually inhabit the stars. And so each star has kind of a patron god or a patron goddess. And when they'll do things, for example, like triangulate their position by the stars, with the FTL, they'll jump to a new location, a few light years or parsecs away, and they will triangulate their position with the stars. That's kind of a religious practice for them, where they'll actually choose which stars do we supplicate and how do we do it. And they have a sacred star. The father god of their pantheon is this extremely dangerous star, or that they have their temple is on a moon orbiting this hot Jupiter planet, super close to the star. So flying there is actually really dangerous. But it's part of the sacrifice that the god requires. And in this book, they actually visit the temple, which is kind of interesting. But their orientation is very much like, no, we don't really care about any of that Earth stuff. We're much more, but we do venerate the different stars, and we have we have this aspect of our religion with our culture.
Okay, so what can we expect technology-wise from this series?
The tech level that they're at. So we've got FTL. We've got space. They have artificial gravity. They have things like plasma cannons, laser stars, different ship to ship. They have a lot of ship to ship combat type stuff. And they have, let's see here, there's a little bit of boarding action and other things like that too. They have not made contact with alien races yet. Or they don't know they've made alien races are not really a factor. No one has openly made first contact with any alien race. If you've read some of the other books, you might know a few things, but it's more, I'd say a little bit kind of on the same par as like Star Trek, Star Wars, David Weber, a little bit more kind of similar, like on that similar level of a tech level.
Okay, and as far as political entities, is it just is everybody like independent, essentially like city-states vibes for each colony now, or is the unified space government still a thing in this world?
Well, among the Outworlders, there's a lot of things that are happening kind of in the Corward stars, kind of in the civilized world. They have a large empire that's kind of fragmented a little bit, and the Outworlders have actually unified a little bit more. So they formed a confederation. So they're not totally they're not like in the early Star Wanderers books, the Outworld Trilogy and the Sons of the Starfarers. Sons of the Starfarers is really where they get together and actually form the confederation. But in those ones, they're much more independent and separate and everything. But most of the politics that happens in these books happens among the Hamaji themselves, and they are very much more about like tribal politics, tribal intrigue, more feudal type intrigue, more of a feudal society in a lot of ways.
Okay. What about the social aspect of society? Is it still like oldest son goes out and makes his way among the stars so you can keep genetics diverse, or has that settled down by the point of this series?
That is still very much part of the traditions, like among the Outworlders. So in the earlier books, the way I had to figure out this, the first people to really kind of go out and settle the outer space, they weren't these nomads. They were more because the technology did not allow really long distance FTL. It was much more risky, and you had to make a lot smaller jumps. Kind of like, I guess, the equivalent of if you're playing Civilization, one of the early Civilization games, is the difference between having a trireme and going to, you have to stay close to shore versus having one of these ships that can go all the way across the ocean in like through 2 or 3 moves. But with that earlier technology, the big limiting factor was you could only jump like a really small ship, these longer distances. And so what happened was you had these groups that would, in these slow lumbering ships, that would colonize these outer places. But the problem is they'd still be pretty small colonies, and they were didn't have a lot of genetic diversity. And so a tradition emerged where you'd have these, and also for commerce purposes, you would have the oldest son would take his father's starship, which basically only has a capacity for one person, and would basically go on a series of trades around the different neighborhood, kind of have this career as a star wanderer. And eventually, when he found a place where he could settle down, he would settle down and have a family there. And so this was kind of the tradition that was going on with those people. It's beginning to get phased out a little bit because the changes in the FTL technology have made it possible to bring larger ships and have more commerce. But it's still very much on the outer fringes of space, which borders on where the Hamaji are. And this is also where Zlata and Sonia start out. That's still very much part of the tradition.
If someone is intrigued by the universe writ large, do you have a suggested reading order for the entire series of books in this space?
I guess the question I see is what's your flavor? Do you like if you're looking for more action and more kind of military SF kind of stuff, you'd probably want to start with Brothers in Exile and do the Sons of the Starfarers books. Brothers in Exile is a crime-free book. It's a pretty and it's pretty short. All those books are between 30 and 50,000 words. So just 4 or 5 hours if you're listening to the audiobook, or if they're I think they're all like 100 to 200 pages or so. I'm finishing up the trilogy for the Outworlder. That's more of a kind of a space opera type book. Has less of a military aspect to it, less fighting and stuff, but more about the characters and their interpersonal kind of stuff. And that is that was the one that started the whole thing. Sons of Starfarers is a spinoff from that one. But for this one, if you really want to, I'd say, well, this series stands alone on its own. But if you do want to get more into like the world and everything, you could probably start with. I would probably suggest starting with Sons of the Starfarers. I think that's going to give you the most grounding, and then go on if you want to Star Wanderers to get kind of the same characters but more with kind of in a different corner of the universe.
Okay. Is there anything about this universe and then the Falconstar Trilogy that we didn't cover that you think people should know?
Nothing really comes to mind. I don't think so. I think that's basically it. What I'm doing right now. I'm trying to finish up these things. I originally wrote. So the first series that I wrote was Star Wanderers. I wrote this novella called Outworlder, and then I wrote a series of other short novellas. And then eventually, like those were out for a while. Eventually, I decided to take those down and combine them all into just one large novel. And then I decided to turn that novel into a trilogy. I've written and published the second book in that trilogy. I've not written the third book yet. I'm going to tackle that after I finish the Falconstar books. But I wrote the Sons of the Starfarers kind of as a spin-off trilogy, or kind of as a spin-off series after that. And then I wrote. And that was out. I finished that in about 2018, And then about 2020 or 2021 is when I published Queen of the Falconstar. So it's been a few years since I've done this. I always intended to make it a trilogy. I just never knew. Well, no, actually, by the time I wrote and published the first book, I knew how the trilogy was going to end. I just had a lot of other projects I was working on, so I hadn't gotten to that one yet. But right now, this is the year I'm actually doubling down and I'm finishing up the Falconstar Trilogy. And then after that, I'm probably going to finish. Probably next year is the year I'm going to finish the Outworld Trilogy and have a third book in that one.
Yeah, the Outward Trilogy is the books I found you with back when the Kindle was the greatest thing since sliced bread because it let me read again. When you have a head injury, even sometimes the large print books you just can't read. That's just not big enough. But Kindle lets you magnify the heck out of it, and so that's when I found you because indie. If you read fast, indie were the only books you could afford to keep up with back in the day. This is before Kindle Unlimited was a thing. And the ebooks TradPub was putting out were like hastily scanned copies. Sometimes whole chapters were missing, and then for that privilege, they wanted like $10 for the ebook.
Yeah.
So
the glory days of the Kindle, the early glory days of the Kindle.
Yeah, it was a different time for sure. But I remember that was the one I found you on, and I'm glad to see you're coming back to finish that one because that's a good one. With the weapons, is this for the ships? Because you mentioned the homage, the kidnaps in the Falconstar Trilogy. Are we talking like lasers and plasmas, or are we talking you kept it kinetic with bullets and ballistics?
There's some kinetic stuff. There's definitely kinetic stuff there. They do use drone swarms too. They'll use those. There's not a whole lot of let's see. It's not super tactical. A lot of the ship-to-ship engagements. A lot of it has to do with managing. So, for example, in this book, very early on in the book, in the first book, it all takes place on one ship. Basically, after they get captured, it all takes place on one ship. Well, one ship, and also kind of the meeting ground space station for the Hamadu, which is the sacred neutral ground where they'll actually come together and do their things they need to do. But it mostly takes place in this one warship, the Falconstar. And in this book, early on, you get to see the home fleet, where they have their farm ships, where they have more of the logistics and stuff, and how they've kept the location of the farm fleet very carefully hidden, and what they do with that. It's very much about them also trying to capture new ships and then acquire new allies to kind of build their war fleet that way. But let's see. A lot of the battles, let's see. No, they've kind of got a mixture of different things. There's definitely a lot of kinetic stuff, and they've got some drones. The biggest thing I think that affects the battle is the way the FTL works. Is that when you jump, when you're on the spaceship and you jump, the size of your spaceship determines how far you can jump, but also how accurate your jump is. Like when you make a jump, you set a target coordinate, but you don't know exactly where you're going to end up. You're going to end up somewhere in the vicinity of that target coordinate, but you don't know it for sure, unless you're jumping. There's a beacon that will actually kind of pull you out of jump space into a specific area. So if you're jumping towards a beacon, the beacon is where you're going to end up. But if you're kind of jumping blind into space, you could end up anywhere. The problem is people will often, like, if your enemies might be setting up a beacon somewhere to kind of pull you out into their ambush, and so that becomes really really key. And a lot of times you will also have kind of these secret routes to go to places where where the beacons are and how to jump to them. They're spaced far enough apart that somebody probably is not going to randomly arrive at them, and unless they have the coordinates for all of them, they can't follow the route. But having these long routes through space that are with these beacons that have the coordinates carefully hidden, that becomes a key tactical aspect of the book.
So for the ship-to-ship stuff, are they shooting missiles, or is it still railguns and plasma guns?
They've got some missiles. They've got a little bit of that. They've got a little bit of each. I think the drones are probably more. The drones become a little bit bigger, but they've got a little bit of each kind of thing. A lot of these ships that they build, they take them from civilian ships that they capture, and they try to modify them as much as they can. So every ship is a little bit unique in what it's got.
That fits with converted ships for pirates and all of the tropes.
Yep.
Yeah, you just put guns where you can.
Yeah.
So, is there a concerted effort by the other governments to come after them in this series, or are we not there yet?
Not yet. They're mostly just a nuisance. The Outworlders do have a defense fleet, but the defense fleet is mostly postured towards protecting them from the Empire, which wants to recapture them. They generally see the Hemiji as basically they don't really understand who the Hemiji are. They think they're just kind of renegade pirates, and they hear rumors about there's a society kind of out there in the middle of, like in deep space that is doing its own thing, but there's not really any commerce, and there's not really a whole lot of back and forth happening. So they don't really know what's happening out there.
So, is there any point you're going to cover that war with the fleet, the government, the Empire, and their fleet?
The Empire and the fleet. That's something I could do at some point, I suppose. Yeah, I don't have any plans for that. I could, I suppose, if I wanted to write more books, do it. I could come up with another series idea. You just planted an idea in my head. What are you going to do? Is this going to turn into a book in the next 3 or 4 years?
I hope so. Okay, so if people wanted to get these books, you said they're available on Amazon and you sell them on your website. Are they for sale anywhere else?
Yeah, they're on. You can buy them on. Let's see. You can buy them on Barnes and Noble, Kobo, basically anywhere you can get ebooks. There's also physical versions. I sell those through. You can obviously get the paperbacks on Amazon. I believe they're also distributed through Drafted Digital, which is Ingram Spark. So you should be able to get them in bookstores too. And I think I've seen the physical copies up on Barnes and Noble too. But probably, and you can also buy them from my store. You can buy them from my online store. I can sign them and ship them out to you. And I think by the time this episode airs, I think I'm going to be running a free promotion on the. I'm either going to have the first book free, Queen of the Falconstar, or I'm going to be very soon having that as part of the release for the Captain of the Falconstar. So that should be available as a free ebook and probably a free audiobook too. A free AI narrated audiobook.
Okay. And if people wanted to track you down on the wild interwebs, where might they do that?
So my blog is called 1001 Parsecs. You'll have a link in the show notes for that. I've been blogging since about 2007. I don't really do any other social media. I don't know if I need to have more of an internet presence, but the blog is basically blog is a good place to find me. You can also sign up for my email list there. I send out an email every month. Like I said earlier, it's got a free short story in each one, and it's also where I have updates and some reading recommendations and some writing updates and life updates and other stuff that I've got there. So a little bit of everything in the newsletter.
Okay. And so obviously you're a reader as well as a writer. So are you reading anything good right now?
Oh yeah, I'm reading a ton of stuff right now. I have found. So this is going to sound a little crazy. I have found the best way to read for me is to be reading about 50 books. Well, maybe not quite as many 50, but to be reading about 20 or 30 books at the same time and read just a little bit of each one, just every other night, like every night. And so I am reading one of the books. So one of my favorite authors, he's more of a traditionally published author, Robert Charles Wilson. He's really good. And I'm reading, what's the name of his book? And I've been reading a lot of books of his that are really good. I've been reading Eifelheim by Michael Flynn, which is kind of a first contact story where the aliens make first contact with us. They crash land in the middle of Germany in the Middle Ages, and it's fascinating because you've got a researcher in the modern day who's trying to research what happened to this village. It kind of a horrible thing happened to this village, and he's trying to uncover what happened. And then you've got the actual story from the people in the village, from one of the priests, and it's really kind of fun because it's the first contact with the aliens, but he really gets it. He tries to get it as historically accurate to the 13th century or 14th century Germans as he can, and in some ways the humans are more alien than the aliens are, which is kind of interesting. And oh gosh, there's just a bunch of other. I've been reading a lot of Louis L'Amour recently too. So
can't go wrong there.
Yeah, no, I've never read a bad book by Louis L'Amour. I've read a lot of forgettable books, but I've never read a bad book by him. That's for sure.
Okay, and as usual, this is the part where I remind you, dear listener, to please be kind and speak your mind on the reviewing platforms. Your reviews help the right readers find the right books, so do your part. It really does make a difference. Now, if someone buys the books directly from you on your internet retailer, can they leave a review there?
I think so. No one has. It might be a little hidden. If you're going to leave a review, probably the best place is going to be either Goodreads or Amazon.
Okay. All righty, and you can find us, dear listener, on our Linktree, linktr.ee, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast. Again, Linktree/Blasters and Blades Podcast, where we link to all the things, the BitChute, the Rumble, the YouTube, the Twitter, the TikTok. We've got our Spotify, our Discord, our Blasters and Blades Facebook group and Facebook page, our email at blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com. Again, blastersandbladespodcast@gmail.com for professional purposes only, people. Save shenanigans from Stab over there on the Instagram, Twitter, and the email. You can support the show by going to buymeacoffee.com/Author J.R. Handley. Again, buymeacoffee.com/Author J.R. Handley. Be sure to put it in the comment section that is for the podcast. It really does help. These episodes aren't free to produce, and every penny makes a difference. And with that, I would like to thank you for spending some of your precious time with us. For my crazy co-host, I am J.R. Handley, and this was the Blasters and Blades Podcast. We'll be back next week at the same time. We'll indulge our love of nerd culture, cheesy jokes, and all things that go boom. And with that, we're going to hit the end button. Thanks for coming on, Joe. This was fun.
Thank you.
All right, wait for it.